The Battle of the Bulge, known as our weight, not the historic battle of World War II, has become America's #1 sport. You can look at all the diet books, specialty foods, and podcasts to know that is true. I don't know how much the diet industry brings in, but I bet it's a bunch. In the words of comedian Bill Maher, even though Maher's description of the change in the appearance of the American population was colorful to say the least, he's not far from wrong. Currently, 1 in 3 Americans are obese. That's not just overweight, sports fans, that's obese. That's 20% over your recommended body weight, or a BMI of 30 or more. Compare that to the 1960s, where the obesity rate was around 14%. It's no wonder that we have become chained to the bathroom scale and stare in horror as those numbers keep rising. But body weight is not the most important measurement you should be worried about. It's the amount of body fat that you have. Not only that, it's the type of body fat that you have. I'll get into that later in the video. But first, let's take a look at the different methods of measuring body fat. The skin fold caliper. When I was in college, this method was used to measure body fat. I was in an exercise physiology class where we measured our body fat. Mine was 18%. Ah, those were the days. Now it's, well, never mind. The caliper back then looked a lot like a wrench. The one I have now looks a lot like a torture device. I guess if it measures your body fat percentage higher than you think it should be, you probably think it is a torture device. The caliper measures the thickness of the skin at various parts of the body. This measures subcutaneous fat, which is the fat measured under the skin. The numbers that you get are put in a formula, such as the Jackson-Pollock equation or one of the various online calculators, or read off a chart to get your results. These calipers are pretty cheap, and you can get them on Amazon. However, I have found that doing this on yourself takes some practice and can be very frustrating. The issue that I have with this method is that they only measure subcutaneous fat. They can't measure visceral fat, which is the fat that you should be concerned about. Unbelievably, I only found one article that addressed this downside. Bioelectrical impedance. This is the method you are using when you use a bathroom scale that claims to measure your body fat. I have one of these types of scales. When you step on the scale, a small electrical current goes through your body. Current moves through muscle more easily than fat because muscle has a higher water content. What the scale is actually measuring is your total body water. It takes that number, as well as your height and weight, to calculate an estimated fat percentage. This method has some accuracy issues, one of them being how well hydrated you are. I weigh in the morning as soon as I wake up, so I'm not very well hydrated. That will make my fat percentage read higher than it probably is. Since I weigh at the same time every day, I'm not really worried about this, since I'm just worried about the change from the original measurement, whether or not it's accurate, what stats nerds term reliability. Hydrostatic weighing. This method determines your body fat percentage based on body density. Generally, the human body is less dense than water. That's why you can float in a swimming pool. Fat floats since fat cells are puffy and not very dense. Muscle cells have more mass per volume, or that old formula D equals M over V, making muscle more dense and it tends to shrink. So in a nutshell, fat people float and muscular people sink. I was able to be measured in this way when I was in college. I sat in a seat over a tub of water that was attached to a scale. You are told to grab your knees, then you are lowered into the water. You are instructed to blow as much air out as you can. The more air you have in your lungs, the more you will float, messing up your results. After the tester gets the data, they bang on the side of the tub and then you can sit up and they pull you out of the water. This method is pretty accurate within 2%. The downside is that you have to be at a university or health club that has the equipment. When I lived in Houston, LA Fitness had one. Since I'm afraid of the water, this isn't something I would actually do voluntarily. Dual energy X-ray absorptiometry, otherwise known as bone density tests. Woo, that was a mouthful. If you're my age, that is older than 60, you've had one of these. Your doctor called it a bone scan, and you get one to check for osteoporosis. It measures the mineral content in certain areas of the skeleton. This test uses low levels of X-rays to measure body composition. This test is short, painless, and doesn't have any unfortunate prep. I see you, colonoscopy. All you have to do is lie on a table. Then the arm of the machine passes over your body. For me, it took about 10 minutes. On the technologist's computer, bone is seen as white and fat and muscle look like shadows in the background. This test is accurate and detailed. It used to be that this type of scan wasn't available to the general public, only in hospitals, and was expensive unless you had insurance. In the Austin area where I live, you can get a DXA in a mobile van. The cost is around $45 and you don't need a doctor's referral. At first, I thought they were only going to give you body fat composition results since it was so cheap, but they do give you both results. The website where you can make the appointment is bodyspec.com. Their locations are in Austin, Dallas-Fort Worth, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Seattle. If you go to a brick-and-mortar location, that is, a hospital, the cost will range from about $150 to $380 without insurance, depending on where you live. All of the brick-and-mortar locations I checked out in my area required a physician's order. I found some brick-and-mortar DEXA scans in my area that were cheaper, around $75, but they only give you fat composition data and not bone density data. So like anything else, you have to do your due diligence. So far, we have been looking at different methods that are used to measure body fat. When you measure your body fat percentage, you want to measure total body fat. This includes subcutaneous fat and visceral fat. Subcutaneous fat is that fat that's under the skin, the fat that you can pinch. Visceral fat is the fat that is wrapped around your organs. It's the fat that you see on that dude walking down the street with a giant beer gut, the belly that feels hard. Skin fold calipers only measure subcutaneous fat. Bioelectric impedance and hydrostatic weighing measures total fat, but can't differentiate between subcutaneous fat and visceral fat. The DEXA scan can't either. So what's the big deal? Why is this even important? Because visceral fat is the fat that you have to worry about. Believe it or not, you can have a flat belly and have visceral fat. This is called TOFI, thin on the outside and fat on the inside. That's not to say that too much subcutaneous fat is okay, though. It really isn't. But visceral fat is more likely to raise your risk for heart disease, type 2 diabetes, as well as stroke. Why is this? Scientists think that visceral fat makes more inflammatory proteins that narrow blood vessels, causing blood pressure to rise. The only way you can tell the difference between subcutaneous fat and visceral fat is by getting an MRI or a CT scan, which can be quite expensive. Unless your doctor orders one, your insurance will pay for it, or you have a lot of cash on hand. That's not really an option. So what to do? Well, there can be a simple answer. Measure your waist circumference. This can give you a rough estimate of your metabolic health. Your waist circumference should be less than half your height. And don't suck in that gut when measuring, you cheater. To avoid making this subject too heavy, I've trimmed some of the fat. So I'll attach where I got my information in the description, if you want to get more of the skinny on this. If you have more info to share, please comment below. Remember, I'm an old broad that likes to learn new things. Please like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell to keep my old brain running.